In 1961, two brothers from New Hampshire sold a hamburger restaurant on North E Street in San Bernardino, California for $2.7 million. That restaurant became the most successful food chain in the history of the world. Over 40,000 locations, $100 billion in annual revenue, a name recognized in every country on earth. The city where it all started filed for bankruptcy 51 years later. $46 million in debt, unable to make payroll. The largest American city ever to go broke, until Detroit beat it the following year by a matter of months. San Bernardino didn't decline the way most cities decline. It didn't lose one industry or suffer one disaster. It sat at the crossroads of every great American movement: wagons, railroads, highways, airfields. And every time the route shifted, the city had to rebuild itself from scratch. It did it 3 times. The 4th time, it couldn't. The valley where San Bernardino sits is one of those places the geography practically named. The San Bernardino Mountains rise behind it to the north, snow-capped peaks reaching above 10,000 feet. And at the mouth of the range sits a natural landmark so distinct it barely seems real. An arrowhead shape, nearly 8 acres across, formed by lighter-colored rock and vegetation on the mountainside, visible from miles away on a clear day. Standing on E Street downtown, the arrowhead hangs above the city like a sign someone put there on purpose. The Serrano Indians, who had lived in the valley since roughly 1000 B.C., had their own name for it. The Mormons, who arrived in 1851, called it the Ace of Spades. Later residents would stamp it on everything: water bottles, sports teams, a credit union. It has watched over every era of San Bernardino's history, unchanged, while everything beneath it changed completely. The first European to name the place was a Franciscan priest, Father Francisco Dumetz, who arrived on May 20th, 1810, the feast day of St. Bernardino of Siena. He was an old man by then, over 6 feet tall in his sandals, heavy-set, one of the last surviving companions of Junipero Serra, the founder of the California missions. A small chapel called Politana was established that year, but the Serrano Indians attacked and destroyed it 2 years later, after an earthquake broke hot springs through the ground and the natives blamed the foreigners for it. A more permanent outpost, the San Bernardino Asistencia, was built in 1829. But when the Mexican government dissolved the missions in 1834, it was abandoned too. The Lugo family received a land grant in 1842, 37,700 acres of ranch land where they grazed 4,000 to 6,000 cattle. Antonio Maria Lugo built an adobe house on the spot where the county courthouse stands today. Raiders came through Cajon Pass from the desert, stealing livestock. Kit Carson and his trappers passed through in 1830. Jedediah Smith crossed the mountains with 15 men in 1826. The valley was on every traveler's route, but no one's destination. What changed everything was a group of people who had already built one city from nothing and were willing to do it again. In the fall of 1851, nearly 500 Mormons descended through Cajon Pass from Salt Lake City, led by Captain Jefferson Hunt and 2 apostles, Amasa Lyman and Charles Rich. They bought the Lugo Rancho, 40,000 acres, for $77,000 with $7,000 down. They built a log stockade fort on the site where the county courthouse stands today, laid out a street grid modeled on Salt Lake City with blocks of 8 acres each, named the streets after places that mattered to their faith: Salt Lake Street, Nauvoo Street, Kirtland Street, Far West Street. They planted wheat, diverted water from Waterman Canyon through a flume, built a flour mill on what they called Mill Street, cut a timber road into the mountains, and established schools. The city incorporated on April 1st, 1854. Apostle Amasa Lyman became its first mayor. At incorporation, roughly 1,200 people lived there. 900 of them were Mormon. They forbade drinking and gambling, reserved a temple block between 5th, 6th, E, and F streets, though no temple was ever built, and created a public square where they celebrated the 4th of July. It lasted 6 years. In 1857, Brigham Young recalled the Mormons to Utah. The reasons were tangled: the Utah War, the fallout from the Mountain Meadows Massacre, internal church politics, and what historians believe was Young's growing fear that a thriving settlement in California's superior climate would drain Salt Lake of its population. Young had authorized the venture, but undermined it almost from the beginning, and his recall came just before the mortgage was fully paid. 2,000 of the 3,000 Mormons in the county packed up and left. They sold their farms, mills, and businesses for a fraction of their value, some for nothing more than the cost of a wagon and a team of horses. The local economy collapsed. The city disincorporated. San Bernardino went from a functioning town with schools and irrigation to a handful of settlers rattling around in a beautiful valley with no one to sell anything to. The arrowhead was still up there on the mountainside, the streets were still laid out, the valley still had water, and people kept passing through. Gold was discovered in Holcomb Valley in 1860 by a prospector named Bill Holcomb, and men poured into the mountains through San Bernardino to try their luck. For a brief, wild moment, the boom town of Belleville had 10,000 residents, the largest settlement in Southern California, and nearly stole the county seat. San Bernardino held on by a single vote. A young Wyatt Earp arrived with his family by wagon train in 1864, a teenager in a dusty valley town. His brother Virgil later became town marshal of nearby Colton. The Earps would become famous elsewhere, but they got their start in San Bernardino County. The gold played out. A severe drought in 1863 and 1864 killed most of the cattle on the great ranchos, ending the Californio ranching era across the region. By the 1870s, San Bernardino was a small commercial center with a couple of large stores, 2 hotels, a population around 1,700, and not much reason for anyone to visit. The Southern Pacific Railroad wanted to lay tracks through the city in 1873, but negotiations broke down, so the railroad founded its own town, Colton, just to the south, and put its tracks there instead. San Bernardino had been bypassed by a railroad before it even had one. What it needed was a competitor willing to fight. In 1883, it got one. On September 13th of that year, after a court order forced the Southern Pacific Railroad to stop physically blocking competitors from crossing its tracks, they had gone so far as to hire armed guards at the crossing points, the first California Southern train pulled into San Bernardino from National City, near San Diego. Engine number 4, civil engineer Fred Paris at the whistle. The California Southern was soon absorbed into the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway, and San Bernardino became, almost overnight, the most important railroad junction in Southern California. The timing was extraordinary. In 1885, the Santa Fe completed its transcontinental link to the Pacific. Within months, a rate war erupted between the Santa Fe and the Southern Pacific. The fare from Kansas City to Los Angeles dropped from $125 to single digits, at one point reportedly to $1. People poured into Southern California by the tens of thousands. As many as 120,000 arrived on the Southern Pacific alone in 1887. California's population grew by 348,000 in a single decade. Real estate speculators planted dozens of paper towns across the region: Redlands, Rialto, Ontario, Etiwanda, many of which existed only on paper when the boom collapsed in 1888, though some flourished. The main streams of settlement came from the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, families drawn by what the California boosters published endlessly, the land where there was no winter snow. Health seekers came in droves on the heels of the boomers, drawn by the dry air. San Bernardino, sitting at the mouth of Cajon Pass, where every train from the east entered the region, was the gateway to all of it. Its population more than doubled in the 1880s alone, from roughly 1,700 to to over 4,000. The Santa Fe chose San Bernardino as the site of its primary West Coast locomotive shops. The original shops were established in 1887, and they grew into a complex that defined the city. By the early 1900s, the shops employed over 2,000 people, the single largest employer in San Bernardino. The facility could accommodate 102 locomotives at a time. A 43-stall engine house rose alongside a machine shop 673 feet long, divided into 3 bays, rebuilt and expanded in the 1920s with the latest labor-saving machinery. The shop had capacity for 315 freight cars and 30 passenger cars. The railroad had its own power plant. It was an industrial city within a city, employing machinists, boilermakers, electricians, and laborers whose wages flowed directly into San Bernardino's shops and homes and schools. The workers needed to get to the shops, and the railroad tracks created a barrier. So in 1928, the Santa Fe built a $100,000 pedestrian tunnel under the yard, roughly 700 feet long, running from 3rd Street to the shops on the north side. It opened formally on Santa Fe Day, May 28, 1928. Thousands of visitors came to walk through it. The old overhead walkway was immediately torn down. For the railroad men who lived south of the tracks, the tunnel was their daily commute, the passage between home and livelihood. But the structure that truly announced San Bernardino's arrival was the depot. The original wooden station, built in 1886, had burned at 11 o'clock on the night of November 16, 1916. Construction began on its replacement, an $800,000 mission-style masterpiece with domes, towers, and a red tile roof. When it opened on July 15, 1918, the San Bernardino Daily Sun declared it the finest railroad station in the West. Inside was a Harvey House restaurant, part of the chain founded by Fred Harvey that operated along the Santa Fe's routes, serving over 1 million meals between the 1880s and the early 1900s. The depot was marvelously clean, the tiled floors and walls polished regularly, the onion domes empty rooms built purely for beauty. The complex, including the roundhouse and shops, was the largest railroad facility west of the Mississippi. San Bernardino wasn't just a stop on the Santa Fe line, it was the line's beating western heart. The city reincorporated in 1886, riding the boom. By 1892, a looped rail system called the Kite-Shaped Track connected communities across the valley, a 158-mile route from Los Angeles through San Bernardino to Redlands and back, with trains departing every 2 hours. By 1911, the Pacific Electric Railway had absorbed the local lines, connecting San Bernardino to Los Angeles and beyond. A person could step on a trolley downtown and ride all the way to the Pacific Ocean. The city's population doubled from 6,150 in 1900 to 12,779 in 1910, the year the Chamber of Commerce was first organized. It nearly tripled again by 1930, reaching 37,481. Tracks were built north of Highland Avenue and along Valencia Avenue throughout the 1920s. In 1882, before Los Angeles had anything comparable, San Bernardino had opened an opera house on Court and D Streets, a 2-story red brick building seating over 1,200, featuring touring performances by Sarah Bernhardt, Lillian Russell, Maude Adams, and Al Jolson. The corner of 3rd and D Streets earned the nickname Whiskey Point. A saloon on every corner, and D Street south of downtown developed a thriving red light district that operated openly until the War Department demanded it be closed in 1941. San Bernardino had always been a rougher, more working-class town than its polished neighbor Riverside, which had split off into its own county in 1893, partly because of a political fight over where to build the courthouse. San Bernardino kept the county seat. Riverside kept its pretensions. The National Orange Show became the city's great annual spectacle. First held in a tent in 1889, it went national in 1911, packed into 2 canvas tents at 4th and D Streets, covering 8,000 square feet. Rain poured continuously, but 3,000 people came. Production cost $744.25. Revenue, $1,180.25. A profit in the rain. A permanent site was selected in 1923, south of Mill Street, and the first exhibition hall, completed in 1925, covered nearly 100,000 square feet, the largest structure of its kind in California. At its peak, the Orange Show drew over 300,000 visitors a year. Albert Einstein attended. The citrus industry that the railroad had made profitable by carrying perishable fruit in refrigerated cars had turned the entire region into the Orange Empire, and San Bernardino was its capital of celebration. Up in the foothills, the Arrowhead Hot Springs Hotel told its own version of the city's rising ambitions. Hotels had operated at the hot springs since the 1860s, burning down and rebuilding 3 times. The 4th Arrowhead Springs Hotel, 6 stories, opened in December 1939 at a cost of $1.5 million, with Judy Garland, Al Jolson, and Rudy Valley performing at the grand opening. Elizabeth Taylor spent a honeymoon there with Conrad Hilton. San Bernardino may have been a railroad town at its core, but it knew how to dress up. Then came the California Theater. On August 15, 1928, the 2,100-seat movie palace opened to a sold-out crowd for the film Street Angel on West 4th Street. Designed by John Paxton Perrine in the California Churrigueresque style for the Fox West Coast Theaters chain, it was the kind of building that made a city feel like it belonged in the same sentence as San Francisco or Los Angeles. A Wurlitzer-style 216 pipe organ, still there today, the only one in Riverside and San Bernardino counties still in its original theater home. Hollywood studios test-screened their pictures there. King Kong, The Wizard of Oz. Audiences in San Bernardino watched them before the rest of America. The San Bernardino Daily Sunday reported that audiences howled in sheer agony of enjoyment at the Marx Brothers in the Coconuts. Will Rogers gave his last performance at the California Theater in 1935, days before his death in a plane crash. Future President Lyndon Johnson, before politics, before Texas, before everything, worked as an elevator operator in the Platt Building downtown. By the late 1930s, San Bernardino had the railroad, the citrus industry, a nationally famous annual fair, movie palaces, a luxury mountain resort, and a downtown on 3rd and E Streets that hummed with commerce. The Santa Fe Depot gleamed at the western edge of town, its domes catching the California sun. The population stood at 43,646 in 1940 and was climbing. Then 3 things happened in quick succession that would define the next 2 decades. A barbecue stand opened, a war started, and a highway became the most famous road in America. On May 15, 1940, 2 brothers opened a little restaurant just off the highway, and no one thought much of it. Richard and Maurice McDonald had come from New Hampshire to California to break into the movie business, and failed. They tried a hot dog stand in Arcadia, then another in Monrovia along Route 66. In 1940, they moved to San Bernardino, a hub of transportation with thousands of railroad workers and base personnel, and opened McDonald's famous barbecue at 1398 North E Street near West 14th. 20 car hops, a 25-item menu featuring barbecue ribs, beef and pork sandwiches, slow-cooked over hickory chips imported from Arkansas. It became the top teen hangout in town. The restaurant sat near Route 66, the 2,448-mile highway from Chicago to Santa Monica that had been designated in 1926. Through San Bernardino, Route 66 ran along 5th Street, straight through the heart of the city. By the 1940s and 1950s, San Bernardino was the last real oasis for travelers who had just crossed the Mojave Desert. Hours of nothing, then suddenly a city with motels, diners, and neon. The Wigwam Motel, built in 1949 on Foothill Boulevard, offered 19 concrete teepees to tourists who wanted roadside Americana with their overnight rest. At peak, more than 1 million vehicles a year passed through the city on Route 66. But the McDonald brothers weren't interested in what everyone else was doing. In October 1948, against the advice of everyone they knew, they shut down their successful restaurant for 3 months and rebuilt everything. They slashed the menu from 25 items to 9, fired all 20 car hops, switched to paper wrappers and plastic cups, cut prices in half. A hamburger cost 15 cents. They redesigned the kitchen floor with chalk marks showing where each worker would stand, each station performing one task. One person grilling patties, one dressing buns, one working the fryer. They called it the Speedy Service System, the first assembly line approach to food service in America. Customers walked up to a window instead of waiting in a car for a car hop. The brothers had turned a restaurant into a factory. Business dropped at first. The teenagers who'd treated the place as a hangout didn't like the new format. But a different crowd came. Families, working people who wanted food fast and cheap. Within months, the lines stretched down the block. It was the single moment that invented fast food. Not in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. In San Bernardino, California, on a block just off Route 66. The brothers bought a mansion in the San Bernardino hills. New Cadillacs every year. They franchised the concept. 14 licenses sold. 10 became operating restaurants. In 1954, a milkshake machine salesman from Illinois named Ray Kroc walked into the San Bernardino location and saw the future. By 1961, Kroc had bought the brothers out for $2.7 million, opened a competing McDonald's across the street, and began building the empire. The brothers kept their original restaurant, renamed it the Big M, and watched the thing they'd invented grow into something unrecognizable. Meanwhile, just blocks away, another entrepreneur was paying attention. Glenn Bell, inspired by what the McDonald's had done, opened Bell's Hamburgers on the corner of Oak and Mount Vernon Avenues. He experimented with tacos, launched Taco Tia on Baseline and Acacia in 1954, then El Taco, and finally, in 1962, Taco Bell in Downey. A friend of Bell's, Neil Baker, also studied the McDonald's model, and in 1952 opened the first Baker's drive-thru, a local chain that now has dozens of locations across the Inland Empire. Two of the most consequential restaurant chains in American history, and a beloved regional one, were all born within blocks of each other, in a mid-sized California city where the railroad workers and the Air Base personnel and the Route 66 travelers created the exact kind of hungry, mobile, time-pressed customer base that fast food was invented to serve. San Bernardino didn't just birth McDonald's by accident. It was the only place that could have. Norton Air Force Base, 2 miles east of downtown, had been built as the San Bernardino Army Airfield in March 1942, activated 2 months later, and named for Captain Leland Francis Norton, a San Bernardino native from 716 21st Street, who was killed on May 27, 1944, when his A-20 Havoc was shot down over Amiens, France, while dive bombing a target. He saved his crew before the plane went down. The base was briefly deactivated in 1947, but Congressman Harry Shepard fought to get it reopened and expanded. By the 1950s, Norton was home to the Air Force Inspector General, the Directorate of Aerospace Safety, the Air Force Audit Agency, and the 63rd Military Airlift Wing. It hosted reserve transport units and served as a key logistics hub for military transport and maintenance operations. At peak capacity, around 10,000 military and civilian workers passed through its gates daily. Their paychecks sustained grocers, barbers, landlords, car dealers, and restaurants across the city, an economic ecosystem that extended far beyond the base's chain-link fence. San Bernardino in the 1950s was humming on every cylinder. The GI Bill brought returning veterans who bought homes, started businesses, and raised families. Vast housing tracts went up in the city's North Central and Del Rosa neighborhoods. Kaiser Steel was roaring in Fontana, employing thousands more. The city's population surged from around 63,000 to nearly 92,000 during the decade. San Bernardino had what every mid-century American city wanted: multiple pillars of employment, a growing tax base, and a downtown where people actually went. In 1949, the National Orange Show's main exhibition hall, the 100,000-square-foot giant built in 1925, burned down completely. By March 1950, a new and larger building was ready. That was the kind of city San Bernardino was in the 50s. Something burned down, and you built it back bigger before the year was out. But three of the pillars holding the city up were already developing fractures that nobody was watching closely enough. The first was the railroad. The transition from steam to diesel locomotives in the 1950s changed everything about what the shops needed to do. Diesel engines required different, more centralized maintenance. The Santa Fe began quietly consolidating, and employment at the San Bernardino shops started a long, undramatic decline. The noon whistle still blew. It blows to this day from the old power plant smokestack, the only structure still standing from the original shops. But every year, fewer workers walked through that tunnel. The second was Route 66 itself. In 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act. The interstates didn't follow Route 66 through city centers. They bypassed them. Interstate 15 ran west of San Bernardino. Interstate 10 curved around the south side. The traffic that had sustained the motels and diners and service stations dried up. Route 66 was progressively decommissioned and officially removed from the U.S. highway system. The road that had made San Bernardino a destination now made it a place people drove past. The third fracture was self-inflicted and irreversible. In 1966, the Inland Center Mall opened on East Inland Center Drive, south of downtown, with easy access from the freeway. For the first time, San Bernardino shoppers had an alternative to 3rd Street that offered free parking, air conditioning, and no street crime. Foot traffic downtown dropped immediately. The city's response was the worst kind of mid-century urban planning. Instead of competing with the mall, it tried to become one. The commercial blocks that had been San Bernardino's downtown core for nearly a century were demolished. The commercial blocks that had been San Bernardino's downtown core for nearly a century were demolished and replaced with Central City Mall, a 2-story enclosed shopping center designed by Victor Gruen Associates. It opened on October 11, 1972, with 52 stores and 3 anchors: J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, and Harris Company, which had occupied its E Street location since opening as a dry goods store in 1905 and building a grand department store in 1927. The city planned a monorail, a 4th anchor, a central park, commercial towers. None of it materialized. And then the freeway finished the job. The route that became Interstate 215, originally designated I-15E, one of the only lettered interstates in America, a designation so confusing it broke Caltrans computer systems, sliced along the western edge of downtown. Unlike the railroad, which had funneled people into the city, the freeway channeled them past it. Because of the railroad right-of-way, motorists could only exit west with great difficulty. Mount Vernon Avenue, once a thriving stretch of Route 66, began to decay. The neighborhoods on either side of the divide started living in different cities. Meanwhile, in the 1970s, a new commercial district called Hospitality Lane was developing in the southern extreme of San Bernardino, south of the Santa Ana River, north of the I-10 freeway. Hotels, offices, chain restaurants. It was everything downtown wasn't. Easy freeway access, new construction, ample parking. Hospitality Lane didn't kill downtown by itself, but it proved that San Bernardino's economic energy could exist entirely outside of the historic core. The city was competing with itself, and downtown was losing. The new City Hall opened in 1973 was a modern 8-story glass and concrete building designed by Gruen Associates, the same firm behind the failed mall, planted in the middle of what had once been 3rd Street. It was supposed to signal renewal. Instead, it sat at the center of a downtown that was emptying out around it. That city hall was eventually shuttered in 2017 due to seismic concerns. As of today, it remains closed. By the late 1970s, Central City Mall already had gang problems. Shoppers left. The mall was renamed Carousel Mall after a 1991 renovation, complete with an actual carousel on the lower level. It didn't work. Through the 1990s, it hollowed out. Harris Company, the institution that had anchored E Street since 1905, closed January 31, 1999. Montgomery Ward went bankrupt nationally in 2001. J.C. Penney left in 2003. The carousel turned in an increasingly empty building. The larger blows kept landing. Kaiser Steel in Fontana closed in 1985. The Santa Fe continued shifting jobs to Topeka. And in 1988, the Federal Base Realignment and Closure Commission recommended shutting Norton Air Force Base. It closed officially on March 31, 1994. 10,000 jobs gone. The annual economic impact, estimated at $67.9 million, evaporated. Combined with the early 1990s recession and the arrival of Los Angeles gangs pushed eastward by LAPD suppression, San Bernardino's economy went into freefall. Middle-class families, particularly those who had worked at the base or supported its workers, moved away. Crime rates spiked. Consider what happened to San Bernardino in less than 4 decades. Route 66 bypassed, downtown gutted for a mall that failed, the freeway cutting the city in half, the railroad shops shrinking year after year, the noon whistle blowing over emptier yards. Kaiser Steel gone, Norton Air Force Base closed, its runways given to cargo planes and warehouses. Each of these blows alone might have been survivable. Together, they hollowed out every pillar that had made San Bernardino function. And the city's unusual charter, a hybrid government where authority was split between the mayor and city manager, where fire and police chiefs reported to both, made coordinated responses nearly impossible. As one analyst later observed, the charter made it almost impossible to succeed. The population, perversely, kept growing, from 118,000 in 1980 to 164,000 in 1990 to over 209,000 by 2010. But the people arriving were generally poorer than those leaving. The poverty rate climbed. The tax base shrank even as the population expanded. The city spent more than it took in, year after year, papered over with accounting that later investigations found troubling. When the Great Recession hit in 2008, San Bernardino was already teetering. The housing crisis devastated the city. Roughly 5,000 homes repossessed, unemployment reaching 16%, nearly double the national average. Property and sales tax revenues collapsed. Pension costs escalated. The state eliminated redevelopment agencies, stripping another revenue stream. On a Tuesday night in July 2012, the interim city manager, Andrea Miller, stood before the mayor and 7-member city council and told them San Bernardino could not cover payroll through the summer. "We have an immediate cash flow issue," she said. The council voted 4-2 to file for bankruptcy. Mayor Patrick Morris, who didn't have a vote, called it a stain on the city. On August 1, 2012, San Bernardino filed for Chapter 9. The deficit was $45 million. Unfunded liabilities, $296 million. General fund reserves were gone. The city stopped all payments to vendors and creditors, including, unprecedentedly, the California Public Employees Retirement System, the biggest pension fund in the country. CalPERS sued. Until Detroit filed the following July, San Bernardino was the largest city in American history to declare bankruptcy. Workers didn't know if their next paycheck would arrive. Some applied for jobs at the Amazon warehouse that had recently opened on the former base property. The city that had once employed 10,000 people at Norton couldn't afford to pave its own streets. Then, on December 2nd, 2015, while the city was still in bankruptcy, still unable to fund basic services, still cutting police and fire, a married couple carried out a terrorist attack at the Inland Regional Center, killing 14 people and injuring 22 at a holiday gathering for San Bernardino County Health Department employees. Roughly 80 people had been in the auditorium. The attackers fled in an SUV and were killed in a shootout with police. The name San Bernardino, which had once meant orange groves and railroad grandeur and the birthplace of the Golden Arches, became overnight a synonym for mass violence. The years of bankruptcy were followed by a broader spike in violent crime that reinforced the city's grim new identity. San Bernardino emerged from bankruptcy in June 2017, began paying creditors again, and the case was officially closed in 2022 after the city posted a $2.5 million surplus, a far cry from the $45 million hole it had fallen into. The grueling and deep cuts we all experienced are in the rearview mirror of San Bernardino's history, Mayor John Valdivia said. But the scars run deep. The city today has a poverty rate of 26%. The child poverty rate is 38%. Among adults over 25, fewer than 12% have a bachelor's degree. 60% of the working-age population is in the labor force. Carousel Mall was finally demolished in 2023. The 43-acre site sits vacant today, awaiting a developer, awaiting a plan. City officials say they want mixed-use development, offices, residences, retail, something that will draw people downtown for the first time in decades. But no plans have been drawn up, and the last developer hired was let go. A breach of contract lawsuit followed. A city councilman estimated the redevelopment could take 15 years. On the former Norton Air Force Base, at least, something grew back. San Bernardino International Airport, warehouses for Mattel and Amazon, a business park. Over 18,000 jobs have replaced the ones that left in 1994, though they are different jobs: distribution, logistics, freight, in a different economy. The Santa Fe Depot still stands at 1170 West 3rd Street. Its domes are intact. The tile roof still holds. The Harvey House is gone, but the building houses a small museum run by the San Bernardino Historical and Pioneer Society. They blow the noon whistle every day from the old power plant smokestack, the only piece of the original locomotive shop still standing. Everything else was torn down. At 1398 North E Street, where Richard and Maurice McDonald opened their barbecue stand on May 15, 1940, neither the original building nor Croc's competing McDonald's across the street survives. There is a small, unofficial museum on the site, operated by Albert Okura, founder of the local Juan Pollo chicken chain. It contains early memorabilia from a company now worth over $200 billion. The Golden Arches are in 100 countries. They are not on the block where they were born. The California Theater still opens its doors at 562 West 4th Street. Still houses its original Wurlitzer organ, the only one in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, still in the theater where it was installed 98 years ago. The San Bernardino Symphony has played there since 1929. The Wigwam Motel is still standing on Foothill Boulevard, its concrete teepees fully renovated, offering free Wi-Fi and a swimming pool to travelers who still seek out what's left of Route 66. The county courthouse still sits on the spot where the Mormons built their log fort in 1851, where the Lugo family built their adobe before that. And up on the mountainside, the arrowhead remains, a formation of lighter rock nearly 8 acres, pointing down at a valley where a Franciscan priest knelt in 1810, where 500 Mormons raised a fort and lost it, where the Santa Fe built the finest depot in the West, where two brothers from New Hampshire figured out how to sell a hamburger for 15 cents, and where a carousel once turned in an empty mall for $1 a ride. The 43-acre lot at 3rd Street sits bare in the sun, nothing on it but dirt and possibility and the long shadow of the mountains.